Doug Pederson was fired by the Philadelphia Eagles late Monday afternoon. I think it was closer to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very late news on Monday. And I've had a full day to stew and gather my thoughts because I disagreed with this firing. I disagreed with this move. It made very little sense to me. Now, some people are like, well, he tanked. He tanked at the end of the season. Of course, you would want to fire him. He's lost the locker room. And I'm like, yeah, potentially he's lost a couple of players, but do you really think that the Eagles locker room could get any worse than it already was by the end of the season with the amount of drama that Carson Wentz had kicked up over the remaining 5 weeks of the season? I mean, really? Come on. No. Doug Pederson getting fired was not because he tanked. It wasn't because of the Carson Wentz situation specifically, although I think the Carson Wentz situation has a big piece to do with it, namely his contract and what to do with him moving forward. But Doug Pederson was fired late Monday after a meeting with Jeffrey Lurie, who, going into it, the perception was, okay, they're just meeting, they're going to hash things out. Doug Pederson is going to be back next year to try to make amends for the horrible season that the Philadelphia Eagles had this season. And obviously, at the end of it, something changed in that meeting to where Jeffrey Lurie was like, we need to move on for Doug Pederson. Lurie's been the owner of the team for 25 years. Doug Pederson, obviously been the coach since 2016. Reports, or the story being, Lurie chose to part ways with Pederson over a discrepancy of vision in how the team was going to look and is going to look over the past couple of years, the next couple of years, whether it's a decision to lock and load, reload, try and win again very soon, or what Doug Pederson was advocating for, what Jeffrey Lurie was advocating for, which was, okay, let's try and win in a couple of years while we work some things out, which, by the way, is the side that I would be on if I'm sitting as a third person, if I'm sitting as a fly in the wall in that room during that conversation. I would say you should probably wait, considering that you're $82 million in the hole in cap space. But regardless, Pederson was reportedly focusing on winning in 2021. Lurie was focused on the mid to long-term success of the Philadelphia Eagles, which, at this point, I don't really see the NFC East getting better, so you do have time to try and get some draft picks. You do have time to to reload while the NFC East is still so bad. I mean, you can still win games against this division. But yeah, Pederson was the coach for 4 years, won the Super Bowl in 2017, the first Super Bowl since joining the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles, the first championship since, I believe, 1960 for the franchise. But first Lombardi Trophy, first Super Bowl win. Doug Pederson should have a statue out in front of the stadium with his name on it. But again, he finds himself fired today because of a discrepancy in vision. And, the situation with Philadelphia Eagles really isn't Doug Pederson's fault. And it really falls on Howie Roseman more than anybody else. So when I'm taking a look at Doug Pederson and I'm taking a look at the body of work of him and both Howie Roseman over the past decade, Philadelphia fired the wrong man. Howie Roseman is absolutely the person that should have been fired over Doug Pederson. And it feels like Doug Pederson, because of what happened in Week 17, has been made the fall guy for how this team currently is running and how bleak the potential looks in the future with all this cap hell that they've found themselves in. And oh my God, all the injuries the past 2 to 3 seasons for the Philadelphia Eagles. If there's somebody that also deserves to be fired, it's the head trainer for the Philadelphia Eagles, because I don't know what they're feeding them. I don't know. I don't know the workouts that they're doing, but the Philadelphia Eagles appear to be made of glass and nothing but glass. I mean, I don't know how a team could be so injury prone for so long. It's mind-blowing to me. So Doug Pederson really is not the person that should be fired. Training staff and Howie Roseman should have been first to go before Doug Pederson. And the thing that's mind-blowing to me, right, is that Lurie said in his interview or his Zoom call or whatever they're doing these days, probably a Zoom call, Jeffrey Lurie said in his interview explaining his decision, something along the lines of, Doug will be and could be on another NFL team by the end of the week. Then why did you fire him? Why did you fire him? If you know he's that good, do you know how hard it is to find a good coach, a good head coach in the NFL? It's so hard. It is astronomically difficult to get a good coach that knows what he's doing, who has won you a Super Bowl, but you let go of him because your visions don't match. Well, do you think if he's delivered you, I understand you're the owner and at the end of the day, everything that you say goes, but if he has delivered you your first Super Bowl victory, don't you think that you should give him a little bit of leeway? You should give him a little bit of trust that, hey, maybe he understands what he's doing? If you know that some other NFL team would be happy to have Pederson, why are you firing him? Why? It makes no sense to me. If there's anybody that the Eagles should be firing, it's GM Howie Roseman. The Eagles fired the wrong guy. Howie Roseman should be gone. Since 2013, Howie Roseman has drafted a massive total of 0 Pro Bowlers since then. In fact, a lot of my research that went into the show today was looking into the drafting and the cap space of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I was pretty shocked. Yeah, what I found, a lot of people, the main decisions with Howie Roseman that people are pointing to is drafting the wrong wide receiver 2 years in a row. And obviously, wide receivers are plentiful. It's very easy to make the wrong decision on these players. But in this case, the players that they had the opportunity to acquire ended up probably being the best wide receiver in that draft class. Of course, the two players that I'm specifically talking about, drafting Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson this past year. Justin Jefferson, by far and away, probably the best rookie wide receiver. Although it is a little bit unfair because Jalen Reagor did get hurt, so we don't really know what his full potential is. You could still call it a bad draft decision because of how good Justin Jefferson was with the Minnesota Vikings this season in his rookie season. If I would argue if Justin Herbert didn't have the gargantuan year that he had, we would probably be looking at Justin Jefferson as the rookie of the year. Definitely, I would say offensive rookie of the year. And then, of course, the other big decision that Howie Roseman made that people are like, you missed badly on that one, buddy, was drafting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf in the second round of the previous year's draft. That would be 2019. And I'm actually a little bit more forgiving on this pick than a lot of other people are. Now, it's easy to look at DK Metcalf and see the freak of nature that he is and say, how could you not draft that? But reality is that when you look at the draft, there were actually 6 other wide receivers that were drafted in the second round before DK Metcalf. San Francisco drafted Deebo Samuel. Tennessee drafted A.J. Brown, which has proven to be a pretty good wide receiver. Kansas City drafted McCole Hardman. Indianapolis drafted Paris Campbell. Of course, Philadelphia drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And Arizona drafted Andy Isabella. And of course, the Seattle Seahawks drafted DK Metcalf with the last pick in the second round. So there were other wide receivers taken before DK Metcalf. Howie Roseman is not alone in missing on DK, but still, at the position in which you could have taken him, You should have drafted DK. Arizona drafting Andy Isabella, I think, is the other questionable draft choice when it comes to wide receivers in that second round. I think they actually picked after Philadelphia in that situation. But out of all the wide receivers that I just listed, DK Metcalf included, DK Metcalf is the best wide receiver out of that bunch. But to go down Howie Roseman's neck, as much as I am railing him at this point, and I say he should be fired, he's lost it, he's lost his touch. You can't really slight him too badly for his drafting when it comes to wide receivers in the past 2 rounds. But what I do want to point out is I did some further research, looking at the notable names that the Eagles had drafted since 2014, and the Eagles have had 48 picks since the 2013 draft, and that draft was, of course, the draft with Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, Pro Bowlers, great players. But the draft after that, every draft after that, the Philadelphia Eagles have drafted 48 players. 21 of those are still with the team. Now, I have a list of all the players here, and a lot of these guys, you won't recognize their name. I thought about reading off the list on the show, but it's like, why bother? At this point, I'm just sucking air for the hell of it. If I'm reading off those names, and I would argue that a lot of these players probably wouldn't be with the team, especially those that were drafted a couple of years ago that are still with the team. A lot of these players wouldn't be with the team if the Philadelphia Eagles weren't made of glass and needing to use those players over and over again because they're so injured all the time. But looking at the notable names, and by notable names I mean names that the casual football fan could more than likely recognize. Notable names drafted since 2014. Nelson Aguilar, first round, pick number 20 in 2015. He's now with the Raiders. Eric Rowe, second round, pick 47 in 2015. Now with the Dolphins. Jordan Hicks, outside linebacker, third round pick 84, 2015. Now with Arizona. Carson Wentz, we know who that is, obviously. First round, pick number 2, 2016, still with the Eagles. Derek Barnett, first round, pick 14 in 2017, still with the Eagles. Sidney Jones, second round pick, number 43, in 2017, now with the Jaguars. And Dallas Goedert, second round pick, 49 in 2018, still with the Eagles. Now, out of all of those names that I just mentioned, I mentioned 7 names. Only 3 of those are still with the Eagles, and arguably, would you even want them there? I mean, Carson Wentz, absolutely great rookie season, or not necessarily. I think actually it was the year after that he had the amazing MVP-like season before getting hurt. But apart from that, it's like, I mean, Derek Barnett is a good defensive end, but he's not a Pro Bowler. The drafting hasn't been there really in every position, not just wide receiver for the Eagles, but that is all forgivable. That most of that is forgivable for me. If it weren't for the fact that this season, the Eagles are minus $82 million in cap space in a market that, mind you, because of the coronavirus, is probably going to depreciate this season instead of rise. So this nugget of $82 million in cap space is going to be really, really difficult for the Eagles to climb out of. And yeah, something to note, if Doug Pederson really wanted to try and win now instead of rebuild and win in a few years, like Lurie suggests that he wanted and disagreed with Pederson on, Pederson is out of his mind if he's going to try and reload with the Eagles with negative $82 million in cap space, even if it's not his fault that it's this way. Again, it's Howie Roseman's fault, which is why Howie Roseman deserved to be fired over Doug Pederson. Even though it's not Doug Pederson's fault, the vision of trying to win in 2021 would have been nearly impossible to achieve. I mean, they would have actually had to gut the roster. Now, obviously, the first move that probably would have happened is they're trading away Wentz. They're trading away his massive contract. But the next highest paid player on the team, I believe, was Derek Barnett at $9.7 million a year. So his contract is probably up. They'd probably lose him in free agency They would probably lose him in free agency as well. So things are not sunny in Philadelphia, and they wouldn't be for a long time if Doug tried to really maneuver the roster and try to win now. Now, that's kind of contradictory to my point that Doug Pederson didn't deserve to be fired, and the reason, of course, for his firing being that Lurie and Doug had different visions. Just because that those two disagreed on their visions for the team doesn't mean that you should fire him. In that sense, I mean, out of all the things to fire a head coach for, disagreement in vision, like I said earlier, this man has delivered you the only Lombardi trophy in your franchise history, and you let him go because you disagree with his vision for the football team. Even if you may be right, even if you may be taking a look at the situation and saying, we have negative $82 million in cap space, we cannot produce a team that's good enough to win the Super Bowl, especially with the teams that are out there right now in the NFC. Tampa Bay, Green Bay, New Orleans. Hell, Washington in their own division. You know, even if that vision discrepancy is there, that's still not enough reason to fire Doug Pederson for things that are not his fault. Again, they fired the wrong guy. Should have been Howie Roseman. The head trainer for the Eagles should probably go to, considering that the Philadelphia Eagles break arms and legs and tear ACLs like it's legitimately their job, which is unfortunate for the players. I mean, if you're going to Philadelphia, you got to be scared. You got to be scared that you're going to either leave the field on a cart or leave with some kind of injury, or you're going to be part of a locker room that's having to put up with a baby in Carson Wentz and all of his drama. But unfortunate for Doug Pederson, I assume that he's probably going to wind up on the New York Jets in some fashion. Joe Douglas and Doug Pederson have a very good relationship. That would be very interesting to me if Doug Pederson became the head coach of the New York Jets. I don't want to go and say too much about this because I would have to think on it further, and I don't want to sell my opinion on it without really giving it much thought. But at first glance, and as I'm thinking about it off the top of my head, Doug Pederson in New York would not be so bad. I think that's a good guy for the job. It would be a bad situation for him probably in terms of going for what he had in Philadelphia to going to the New York Jets, which is obviously an abysmal wasteland that hardly nobody wants to go to. But hey, depending on who they draft, it could be something beneficial for Doug Pederson. If they draft a Justin Fields, a new quarterback, it could be something. It could be something. Doug Pederson generally has had a bunch of success despite the season. I mean, he made the playoffs 2 out of the 4 seasons. And of course, as I've been saying, he's won a Super Bowl. He's got a good relationship with GM of the New York Jets and Joe Douglas. It could happen. But as it stands now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they fired the wrong person. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching that segment of the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. If you're interested in watching more of these segments coming out every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday as the show does, you should click subscribe to the Hard Headed Sports YouTube channel. And if you are interested in listening to the entire Hard Headed Sports Podcast in full, links in the descriptions to the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts available on all those platforms. Thank you so much for listening, watching, and I will see you very soon.